The Venator-class Star Destroyer is perhaps the most iconic starship from the prequel era, especially for fans of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. These kilometer-long warships, the precursors to the infamous Imperial-class Star Destroyers, were the backbone of the Republic Navy during the Clone Wars, favored by Jedi generals and used in a variety of roles. In Star Wars: The Clone Wars, we see the Venator frequently employed as a frontline battleship, making up the core of Republic Navy formations. But while the Venator sometimes performed well in this role, it was actually a terrible battleship. In this video, we're going to explain why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Venator-class Star Destroyer was 1,137 meters long with a wedge-shaped hull, 2 clusters of powerful drive thrusters, and 2 command bridges located atop tall conning towers near the ship's aft. The Venator was a fairly defensible ship, comprehensively armored and boasting some of the strongest deflector shields of its time. It required an immense crew of 7,400 per ship, most of whom were likely hangar deck personnel, and it could carry an additional 2,000 passengers. Despite its huge crew complement, the crewed sections of the Venator were actually quite small, with most of the Star Destroyer's internal space given over to hangar areas and internal systems. Most of the warship's decks were located in the bridge tower and along the edges of its hull. The hangar areas that took up most of the rest of the Venator were the Star Destroyer's biggest selling point. The main hangar area dominated the warship's front half, featuring an enormous landing strip running down the vessel's spine, lined with dozens of hangar bays on both sides and repair bays beneath the central ship. Above the landing strip was a massive set of bay doors which could open to deploy hundreds of starfighters at once. The Venator also featured a ventral hangar bay which could be opened to the main hangar via a blast door in its roof. Small corvettes could dock in the ventral bay, which could also deploy landing craft during planetary invasions. Finally, the Venator featured a pair of secondary hangars along its broadsides where non-military craft could land, or the Star Destroyer could dock with a space station. This dizzying array of hangars gave the Venator the largest starfighter carrying capacity in the Republic Navy. At full strength, each Star Destroyer could carry 192 ETA-2 interceptors, 192 V-wings, 36 ARC-170s, 40 LAAT gunships and/or LAAT dropships, 24 ATTEs, a selection of shuttles and support craft, and an entire prefabricated garrison base, plus up to 20,000 tons of cargo. The sheer size of this complement was what necessitated the Venator's 2 bridges, one of which was completely given over to flight control. This enormous complement meant that a single Venator could turn the tide of a starfighter battle and deploy an entire clone army to fight on the ground. Of course, starfighters weren't the Venator's only weapons. It had plenty of guns as well. Its main weapons were 8 DBY-827 heavy turbolaser turrets, which were mounted on either side of the bridge stalk and more powerful than standard heavy turbolasers. The Venator also featured 2 medium turbolasers, 1 per broadside, plus 52-point defense laser cannons, an unknown number of flak guns, 6 tractor beam projectors, 4 proton torpedo tubes, and on some ships, a SPHAT turbo laser mounted in the ventral hangar. Now, based on that description, you might think the Venator was a pretty powerful warship. If so, you're right. The Venator was by no means a bad ship, and it could be effective when it was used properly, that is. As we mentioned earlier, most of the time, the Venator was used as a battleship, especially by Jedi generals. This was a terrible misuse of this ship. It was clearly designed as a carrier, not a battleship, bringing starfighter squadrons into battle and providing fire support from the rear lines. It just wasn't suited for the role it was often used in. Most glaringly, the Venator's huge hangar areas compromised the ship's defensibility, especially the main hangar. The design of the main hangar meant that the spine of the entire forward section of the ship was essentially hollow, undermining the entire vessel's structural stability. When the main hangar doors were open, they gave enemy warships a 500-meter long opening to fire at, and even when the doors were closed, the landing strip was a massive weak spot. If a Venator's shields went down and the hangar doors were breached, or worse, left open, Separatist ships could easily tear the whole ship apart by firing on the hangar deck, blasting apart the whole front of the Star Destroyer from within. The ventral hangar had the same problem, but worse, since it didn't have bay doors to close. Generally speaking, you didn't want enemy ships firing on your main hangar for a few reasons. Firstly, when the main hangar was particularly large and close to the main axis of the ship, as it was for the Venator, enemy vessels could pretty much count on hitting important power trunkings or structural supports with every shot into the hangar. Secondly, starfighter hangars tended to have lots of explosive stuff lying around, including fuel and missiles. With the Venator, which carried hundreds of starfighters at a time, a stray laser cannon bolt hitting a refueling tank could cause a massive chain reaction, and since the Venator's main hangar ran right down its central axis, this could destroy the whole ship. This massive weak spot could be excusable if the Venator was used as a backline carrier, as was probably intended. However, since the Republic Navy loved to field it front and center, where it would inevitably soak up loads of enemy fire, this weak spot was essentially one big self-destruct button that the Separatists could press once they brought the Venator's shields down. Furthermore, the Venator was severely lacking in firepower for a frontline warship. Its main turbo lasers were powerful, but there were only 8 of them, all on the Star Destroyer's upper broadsides. For stock models, the Venator had only these turrets, plus 2 medium turbo lasers and a handful of torpedo tubes and flak guns to use against enemy capital ships. All of these were broadside mounted, while the main turbo lasers also had limited forward and dorsal arcs. Some models had powerful SPHAT turbo lasers in their ventral hangars, which granted the Venator a little more anti-capital ship firepower, but in general, these Star Destroyers were severely lacking in this regard. In comparison, the Separatist Munificent-class Star Frigate, which was of a much smaller class of warship, had over 40 turbo lasers, while the Victory-class Star Destroyer, which was actually designed as a battleship, had 50 turbo lasers total, covering its broadside, fore, dorsal and ventral arcs. The Venator just couldn't compare. Most of its weapons were point defense guns designed to protect against enemy starfighters. This was in keeping with the Venator's intended role as a carrier. Its armaments were meant for use against enemy squadrons that breached the front lines in battle, with most of its anti-capital weaponry designed for close quarters. Those 8 main turrets were likely the only guns on the whole ship that weren't actually intended primarily for defense. It's also worth noting that the Venator had other flaws that would have been a problem for the ship no matter its roles. Its exposed bridges were one of them, though we're not going to harp on that since it's common to virtually all Star Wars warships. The Venator's big flaw though was that even for a backline carrier, its weapon arcs were lacking. Virtually all of its weapons, including every single one of its point defense guns, were broadside mounted. Only its main turbo lasers and the optional ventral SPHAT guns could fire along other arcs. This is inexcusable. Those Star Destroyers that didn't have ventral SPHATs had no weapons whatsoever on their undersides, and none of the Venator's point defense guns covered the areas that enemy starfighters would likely target. The Venator could do absolutely nothing about fighters attacking its main hangar, ventral hangar, or command bridges, relying solely on its starfighter squadrons. The Separatists exploited this weakness a few times in the Clone Wars, with fighter craft attacking the bridges of the Resolute twice with impunity, successfully destroying the ship the second time. The Venator's horrid point defense coverage made its main hangar weakness especially glaring. If a Star Destroyer had its shields down and main hangar doors open, there was literally nothing it could do to stop a squadron of Hyena bombers from dropping their payloads right on the hangar and blowing up the whole ship. All told, the Venator was a flawed vessel, and its flaws were made 1,000 times worse by its catastrophic misuse by the Republic Navy. To make matters worse, during the second half of the war, the Republic had another Star Destroyer that would have filled the frontline battleship role so much better. The Victory-class Star Destroyer, which was actually designed to go toe-to-toe with Separatist warships. Yet, the Victory was chronically underused, and the Venator continued to dominate the Republic Navy for more than a year after the Victory-class's premiere. It's honestly pretty shameful. To summarize, the Venator-class was cool, but the Victory-class was better. But what do you think though? Have your thoughts about the Venator changed? Would you like to see more videos about these iconic Star Destroyers in the future? Let us know all that and more in the comments section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.